Hey y'all. So I got some comments about the way I pronounce this hero's name. And yes, I know there is a Y in between the I and the S, and so, it's not technically Islander and it should be pronounced Iyslander, but I just can't take the hero seriously if her name's Iyslander. Like, hey, I'm an ice hero, and yeah, my name's Iyslander. I just find it very difficult to take the hero seriously. But people don't like it when I say Islander, so I'm just gonna go ahead and call her Jaina from now on. Sometimes I might call her Elsa.
Not all ice queens are the same, okay?
Yeah, all right. So anyway, let's get into this. So we are Jaina versus Viserai, and opponent won the die roll and chose to go first, and they started with a moderate tide into a Spellblade Assault, so that's a very strong start. Turn one, they basically just create 5 rune chants, which is effectively leaking 5 damage turn one, which is very strong. We have drawn into 2 Frost Hexes. Somehow, when I'm against Guardian and I need my Frost Hexes early, I never see them. But when I'm against aggro and I don't want to get Frost Hexes, and don't plan to play Frost Hexes, I see them all. But anyway, my opponent just switching their pitch there real quick. I can block this out, and I keep the Frost Hexes in my hand just in case. I mean, since it's turn 1, I might be able to get one or both of these out for free. It's obviously not part of my game plan, but my deck gave me 2 Frost Hexes, I keep them. But then we drew into our tech card for this matchup, which is perfect. We drew into our Skawa, so that's very nice. So I can just get rid of the advantage my opponent got on turn 1. And remember, against Viserai, rune chants are more than just damage. They also discount his attacks. So this feels really good. I pitched the full 5 into Skawa to get rid of those rune chants, and I just get rid of the Frost Hexes. Like I said, that's not the primary game plan I want to do when I'm into an aggro deck like Viserai. So I was considering pitching just 4 into Skawa and then having 2 left over to Waning Moon. The thing is, the damage, if you think about it, is actually the same. Each rune chant, me popping an extra rune chant deals 1 more damage from Skawa, and also makes my opponent deal 1 less damage. So popping 5 rune chants is effectively a 10 damage swing. Popping 4 of them will be an 8 damage swing, and then pitching 2 into Waning Moon gives me another 2 damage, so it also becomes 10 damage. Except that rune chants discount my opponent's attacks, so I prioritize killing the rune chant over the slightly extra raw damage on my part. So we go ahead and do that, and we get to arsenal the blue Aether Ice Vein. Skawa is a card that I have in my sideboard, mostly just in case of Prism, though I really don't expect to be playing Jaina until Prism LLs, so there's an argument that I should just remove it from the deck list. But then again, there does seem to be some sort of resurgence of Viserai. I know some people are really looking to Viserai to be one of the premier aggro decks, in which case it's an argument to bring Skawa back in. So for now, I just have it in the deck, and it definitely came in useful there. Okay, so yeah, opponent's turn turned out to be pretty weak after we destroyed their 5 rune chants. This is coming in with a blue Spellblade Assault, and I'll go ahead and flash out the Aether Ice Vein. Yeah, my opponent had a Rune Flash in hand, so a red Rune Flash, so they're definitely pretty sad that we destroyed their rune chants. This is just 2 physical, and I prioritize using a card to Waning Moon my opponent instead of blocking 2 physical. So go ahead and toss that Icebind. Icebind, another card that I'm actually looking to remove from my deck. Also note that we have brought the Pajamas in for this matchup. Yeah, but since we blew up our opponent's rune chants, they didn't come in with any arcade, so we haven't gotten any ticks of it yet. And on our turn, we go ahead and encase, which is actually quite relevant against Viserai. It doesn't turn off the hero ability, but it turns off creepers. And my opponent will have Tunic up on their turn, so encasing that is also very nice. Okay, opponent just takes 3 and accepts that all this stuff is frozen. They still get to tick up the Tunic, because that's not an activated ability, but yeah, they won't be able to use it or the creepers this turn. Okay, opponent starts with Morven Skies, and we'll go ahead and give them the Frostbite now. On my turn, just looking at this hand, I definitely want to arsenal the Channel Lake Frigid and hit my opponent with an Erase Phase. Erase Phase also going against Viserai. It turns off their hero ability, it turns off Morven Skies, so definitely glad to have that in this matchup. Opponent blocks 2 from the Aether Hail and gets a Frostbite, so yeah, so they managed to have the blues this turn, which is a little unfortunate for us. And then they pay the full 3 into the Shrill. This Shrill is coming in for 5 physical and 2 arcane from the Rune Chants. And on hit it creates another 2 because it's a yellow Marvin Skies. My opponent also created a Rune Chant on the back here, which they just forgot to represent, but I will take that extra damage later on. So I have an option here of blocking this Shrill to stop an extra 2 damage. I could put the Frosting and the Raise Face in front of it. But since I'm on like the tempo game plan, I feel like me trying to block, like I will still leak damage even if I block this eventually. And so in this sort of tempo game plan, I just want to gain tempo, and being able to Erase Face my opponent next turn along with Arsling Channeling Frigid to me sounds like a good tempo plan. So I just, yeah, so I go ahead and use the 2 floating to block the Rune Chants. That's just so I get a charge on the chest, because blocking a Rune Chant when you have this chest is actually very, very efficient. It basically immediately refunds you a resource, because later when you use the Waning Moon, yeah, you can use it for free. Yep, and then we go ahead, take the damage, and then take another 6 from Rosetta, because 2 Rune Chants got created on the back from the Marvin Skies hit. And I'm supposed to take 1 more because of the Viserai trigger my opponent forgot. And I'll be taking it soon on my turn. So we go ahead and erase, attempt to erase our opponent's face. And I really like the Erase Face and CNC in Jaina, because, well, like, let's just take a look at my opponent's equipment, right? Like, normally you sit across Viserai and you're like, oh, they have Skullcap, I guess now they might have Crown of Providence, and the Grasp of the Arknight. So when you send a CNC in front of them, they kind of just laugh at you and put their fridge in front of it. But when they're against Jaina, they're like, oh, I need Arcane Barrier. And yeah, right over there, I took that 1 Runechant damage. Yeah, they're against Jaina and they're like, oh, I need my Arcane Barrier, so let me swap out my fridge for these things. And then I'm like, cool, nice 0-block equipment you have there. Here's a CNC, here's an Erase Face. I really like the fact that I can sort of fork my opponent in that sense, where they've brought in the AB and I punish them by coming at them with physical attacks, which are pretty devastating. And then we get to Arsenal Channel. Ooh, and then our opponent just plays a Runeblood Incantation, which is actually quite annoying. And honestly, for this reason, Viserai is probably one of the better aggro decks into Elsa, because of their ability to just sort of take off turns to set up. Like, you know, if they started with an attack or something, I'd love to play out the channel and like just stop their turn. But they basically just say no to my disruption by being like, all right, I'm just going to do something that your disruption doesn't affect. And I'm going to set up and leak damage into you later on by doing it this way. The other thing about this is that, you know, I can't use my cards efficiently. Elsa definitely does like to block a little, at least the way I want to play the tempo plan. I want to block a little and then do an efficient 2 or 3 card play on my turn. But if my opponent isn't attacking, I can't block, and my 5-card hands aren't very good. So just looking at the hand I have here, it's just, you know, I don't really go wide. I can't encase and Erase Face my opponent unless I pop Stormstriders or something. So it does get kind of awkward. Over here, I was considering just playing out the Channel like Frigid, even though it's not going to block anything. I'm not going to tax my opponent right now, just so I can Waning Moon them for an extra 3, because otherwise I'm just not able to efficiently use my cards. But because we drew 2 reds at the same time, I couldn't do that and do something good on my turn and Arsenal a blue ice card. So I decided to just pass and not do anything on my opponent's turn. So yeah, definitely very tricky matchup, this one. So I go ahead and start with the Cold Snap. I'll just pitch one of my reds. And this Cold Snap has go again, so I guess it does. It is one way I can use my cards efficiently. But it's definitely not as good as like just like blocking a little and then attacking. Okay, and then my opponent allows the Arsenal to be frozen, and then I can erase their face. That's the other thing about these sort of physical attacks. You know, if my opponent had paid there because they're expecting more arcane damage, suddenly the 2 floating just looks really stupid because it's a physical attack afterwards. But they didn't pay, so we already effectively got 1 card from them. and they'll just take 3 from his erased face, and the face has been erased. And we have a Channel Lake Frigid still in our arsenal, so that's quite a potent thing. And on my opponent's turn, the Runeblood Incantation triggers, and I can actually respond to that because it is a start of action phase trigger, not a start of turn trigger. So I use that opportunity to go ahead and play this channel into my opponent. Of course, this could have been a mistake. I mean, if my opponent just did something similar like the previous turn, where they just like read the runes or incantation, maybe this channel doesn't stop much. Okay, and then my opponent pitches 4 into this Amplify the Arknight. It's being taxed an extra 2 because of Channel and Frostbite, but then it's being reduced by 1 because they own a rune chant. So this is coming. So they pitch 4. The 1 rune chant we've just very nicely block, and we get a counter on a chess piece, and that feels really good. And then there's 6 physical coming at us, and looking at this hand, so I have the option to block 3 here, and then pitch the Coronet Peak on my turn and arsenal the blue Ice Bolt. Or I can just take the full 6 and get to set up Insidious Chill. So I actually think the better play for me, for what I was supposed to do here, was actually set up Insidious Chill. Because if you think about the sort of damage I'm taking to set up Insidious Chill. Okay, so if I block 3 here, I take 3 and I get to Coronet Peak on my turn. However, if I just go ahead and take 6 here, and get to play Insidious Chill and arsenal the Icebind, this means that I'm going to my opponent's turn already with a Fuse card in my arsenal, which means I can play it, fuse it, and trigger Insidious Chill, which would take a card from them anyway. So it's kind of effectively like I'm just delaying my Coronet Peak. Instead of doing it on my turn, I do it on their turn with one of my Insidious Chill charges. So then the question becomes, do I take an extra 3 damage to have 2 charges of Insidious Chill, like, floating around? And I think the answer to that is a definite yes. But that was not the math I did when I was playing. It's something I'm looking back and realizing I should have done. So anyway, so I did not see that, so I go ahead and on my turn just pitch the Insidious Chill to Coronet Peak. I mean, I have to do this to keep my channel around. Whereas the alternative line of play I was suggesting was pitch Ice Bolt to play the Insidious Chill. Sure, I take 3 extra damage, but I get to arsenal the Icebind, still keep the Channel Lake Frigid around. And Insidious Chill will, disrupt my opponent a lot more. So my opponent triggers their Runeblood Incantation, and I will go ahead and respond to this, just give them the Frostbite right now. And looking at my hand, I know I want to arsenal this Hypothermia, which means that I'm not looking to block very much this turn. Well, at all, just the 1 floating to stop a rune chant. Because on my turn, I can Aether Ice Vein Fused and then arsenal the Hypothermia. Right, so my opponent just takes the damage. Okay, and then they pitch 2 into Read the Runes. Yes, because of the Frostbite and Channel, they pitch a full 2 into the Read the Runes. So yeah, Channel definitely slowing our opponent down there a little. Because, if Channel wasn't there, they could have played Gloomveil and then Read the Runes. Because the Gloomveil would have had go again from the incantation triggering. Right, so we go ahead and do a red Aether Ice Vein, fusing with the Hypothermia. The sad thing about this is that when we arsenal Hypothermia, we obviously, when we fuse with Hypothermia, we give our opponent information that we have Hypothermia in our arsenal. And my opponent takes 5 and discards another Read the Runes. Cool. And we go over to our opponent's turn. Right. So we no longer have Channel. I just forgot to move it off here. Yeah, we no longer have Channel. Our opponent's incantation did trigger at the start. And I could have responded to it, but I wasn't going to respond with my Hypothermia. Until I know that my opponent's playing something like a Morven Skies or something. So yeah, so my opponent just goes ahead and plays his Rune Flash for free, which is definitely very annoying. And my opponent still has 2 cards in hand and a card in arsenal. So just based on first my opponent having the knowledge that I have a Hypothermia, and based on them just starting with a Rune Flash, I realized they're probably not going to allow me to, get value out of my Hypothermia this turn. So I figure it's probably best if I try and punish my opponent by using Storm Striders to continue disrupting them. Because if I just don't disrupt my opponent at all. I'm probably going to be taking a lot of damage. So I'll just disrupt my opponent by playing this red Aether Ice Vein. Yeah, it's pretty sad. I was really hoping my opponent starts the turn with a non-attack. Because if they start a turn with a non-attack, like any non-attack, like say it was an incantation, doesn't even need to be something like that gives the next thing go again. A better play might have been just to Storm Striders out the Scour and pop the 5 rune chants that were there. I could have, done the Scour in response to an incantation trigger, but I'm against a Viserai. I'm fully expecting them to start their turn with a non-attack instead. But they didn't. They do this, which plays around my Hypothermia, plays around Scour, Storm Strider's Scour. So yeah. So I go ahead and Storm Strider Ice Vein. And the nice thing about Storm Striders in Elsa is that, like, we're very used to Storm Striders in Kano, where you only do it on the kill turn. But in Jaina, it's definitely more of you use it as like a tempo play. Yeah, you use it if you've maybe fallen behind a little, or to like just punish your opponent for making a certain play. And it's totally fine for you to do that, because the rest of the game is just grinding them down anyway. Ideally, I think I found the best Storm Striders play to be Encase on your turn, followed by a freezing point on their turn. Anyway, so our opponent pitches a blue, and that is a blue Morven Sky. So we know they had it, so we know they're probably playing around our Hypothermia. And so now I have to decide whether I want to use this 2 floating to prevent some damage and get a charge on my chest, or do I want to just use it to Waning Moon right now? And with the life totals this low, I decided to save it to Waning Moon, because I'm not sure when I'm gonna get like a second charge on the chest. And I think that was a mistake. Like the first point of Arcane that I block with the chest is basically free, and I definitely should take advantage of that. But I didn't. I opt to just be a little more aggressive and just use the 2 floating to Waning Moon. And our opponent uses that 1 float to meet and greet here. This meet and greet does have go again from us taking Arcane, but we could stop it by playing out a Hypothermia. However, my opponent hasn't played a non-attack this turn, so even if I flash out this Hypothermia to stop them from swinging Thorn, it only stops 2 physical. So I don't think that's worth it. And also, actually, if my opponent does want to swing Thorn, they would need to activate the Tunic. So I could respond with a Hypothermia after they've activated Tunic to give them the Frostbite, and so they won't be able to swing Thorn anyway. Yeah, that'll be a much better Hypothermia play, where I stop the 2 damage and I waste my opponent's Tunic. There's no point doing the Hypothermia now. So now the question is, how much do I care about the meet and greet giving my opponent a Rune Chant? I could, block with a Frost Axe and block with like the Coronet Peak. However, I think it's better to just let my opponent have the Rune Chant. In the end, it's the same damage. If I use the Coronet Peak now to stop 1 more physical and the Rune Chant, it's only blocking 2. Whereas if I use it to block 2 physical later on, it's still blocking 2. So it's kind of the same damage, except letting my opponent have a Rune Chant might actually reward me because of my chest piece. So, yep. So I go ahead and just use my 2 floating to Waning Moon them, and I just block the meet and greet with the Frost Axe. Yep, so we take the 1 and opponent gets a Rune Chant, and now they're considering using Tunic to Thorn, but then they remember that I have a Hypothermia and I can give them a Frostbite instant speed, in which case I would stop the Thorn anyway, so they choose not to. Although I think if they did that, I probably wouldn't have flashed out the Hypothermia, because then I would go into my opponent's turn without an Arsenal. So yeah, so now I'm just hoping, we are kind of on the back foot here. I'm just hoping that with this Hypothermia and Arsenal, we can sort of stop our opponent from attacking twice. From now on, that's the name of the game here for me. I'm just hoping my opponent can't attack us twice. I'm going to try and make that happen. Okay, and then our opponent starts with a lead the charge, which is really, really bad for us. It's way worse than a Morven Skies, because lead the charge obviously goes around Hypothermia, because the attack doesn't gain go again. The opponent just gets an action point. So that's really sad for us that our opponent had to lead the charge. I asked them after the game, and that was actually just lead the charge is Prism Tech, which they had accidentally left in. but ended up rewarding them. So we need to think about what we're doing on our turn, and I figure out, I think the best way to try and gain tempo back is to play Channel Lake Frigid on my turn. If I play Channel Lake Frigid on my turn and I have a Hypothermia in Arsenal, there is a good chance that between the two of them, it'll be difficult for my opponent to attack twice. Like, Hypothermia stops any Marvin Sky stuff, and Channel Lake Frigid makes activating Creepers just a lot more expensive. So I figured that's probably my only way out of this. So I go ahead and block with my cards that aren't Channel Lake Frigid and aren't something I'm going to pitch to the Channel Lake Frigid. And my opponent goes ahead and remembers the Viserai trigger from playing the Runic Reclamation. Yeah, everyone's a little rusty on Viserai. Yeah, so I make another mistake here. I go ahead and block 7 on this Reclamation like this with the Coronet Peak and take a Rune Chant. When really, I mean, the Runic Reclamation's on hit, has no effect right now. I should have used my 2-block blue ice card, the Incarceration, to actually block Arcane. Not only will that give me a charge on my chess piece, it also ends up blocking more than just 2. Because, I mean, it's clear my opponent's going to swing a Thorn after this. So I should, if I block the Rune Chant with that blue, I have 2 floating. My opponent swings Thorn, I can block Rune Chant and block one of the Rosetta Thorn's Arcane. So not only have I blocked 3 with a card instead of 2, I've also gotten a charge on my chess piece. So this, along with the mistake that I made earlier, where I didn't block Arcane and I didn't get an extra charge on my chess piece, kind of it's a very inefficient play by me, and yeah, is not the sort of mistake I should be making. Yep, and then opponent comes in with a Thorn. This is 1, 2, and 2. And like I said, my priority now is just to make sure something like this doesn't happen again, where my opponent gets to attack twice. And the only way I see that happening is if I just play out Channel Lake Frigid on my turn, and I have this Hypothermia in Arsenal. So I have to go ahead and take this, and I just hope that, if my opponent is forced to just come at me with 1 attack, then I can sort of get back into the game. Yep, so our turn's just channel, and let's see what our opponent does. And following that, drawing into 3 reds definitely, it's just not the greatest. Although we have enough block 3s, so, that part is good. You will notice that I have a Channel Bleak Expanse in here. Yeah, so that was a card that I initially did not have in the list, but then I came around to it because I realized that against like Fies and Briars, which are pretty common right now, the only games I've lost against them is when they get to resolve multiple belittles. So Channel Bleak Expanse kind of just completely stops that. But, if Belittle was the only thing the Channel Bleak Expanse hits, I still wouldn't put it in. But it turns out Channel Bleak Expanse hits a lot of things. So against Briar, it stops their Sonata, it stops Force of Nature, it stops Snatch, and it stops Belittle. Against Fi, it stops Belittle, it stops Art of War, it stops their Mask of Momentum. So it turns out it actually has a decent amount of applications that I realize I'm going to put it in. And against Viserai, it stops Become the Arknight, it stops Sonata. Against Lexi, it stops 3 of a Kind and Art of War. So all that considered, I decided I'm going to put the Channel Bleak Expanse in and see how that works. And I have been pretty happy with it so far. And they choose to come at me with this Amplify the Arknight. So yeah, just looking at what they pitched, they did have another attack. So it looks like, I don't know, like maybe they just bricked, or maybe Channel Lake Frigid is stopping them from using the creepers because it becomes too expensive. And so we have an option to, of which 2 reds we want to block with. So, we could say a block with Encase and another red and come at opponent like just a Freezing Point, which is just deal 5 damage. Or we get to Encase our opponent and then pitch the Ice card Refuse with into Waning Moon. And I prefer playing out the Encase because, like I said, I just need to stop my opponent from attacking 2 times. And Encasing will freeze their creepers, and I still have Hypothermia in my arsenal, which means 2 of them combined, just frozen creepers plus Hypothermia in arsenal, means it's unlikely my opponent gets to attack twice. So I choose to keep that, even though it's easier to block. You can block more from Encase. Like, my opponent can sort of block 4 total if I do Encase and Waning Moon, whereas if I just do a Freezing Point, they can only block 3. They can only block 2. But I prioritize getting my opponent's creepers frozen. Okay, so my opponent blocks 1 from the encase, takes 2, all this stuff's frozen, and then I pitch the channel. Bleak expands to Waning Moon them for 2. Right, yeah, and then my opponent asks whether they can take it back, actually, and block 2 on the encase, and block 2 on the Waning Moon, because they pitched a blue lead the charge. Yeah, so they take it back, and they do end up blocking 4. So we did sort of get punished for breaking up arcane damage that way. But, you know, opponent's Creepers and Vexing Quill Hand is frozen, which is actually quite relevant because, you know, they could threaten lethal with Vexing Quill Hand. Just Vexing Quill Hand to Thorn is lethal, but since the Vexing Quill Hand is frozen, you know, it's not. And then they Sonata and they whiff, so we're definitely feeling pretty lucky about that. Although at the same time, you know, even if they hit an attack, like I said, with the Creepers frozen and Hypothermia and Arsenal, they can only attack once anyway. So we are feeling pretty good. Cool. And our opponent needs to pitch to swing the Thorn. They can't activate Tunic because it's frozen. And here at this point, I figure I just need to play out this Hypothermia just so I can just so I can activate Waning Moon and start dealing damage to my opponent. Yep, so we do the Hypothermia. I mean, there's no... Yeah, there's no relevant effect on it except that we get to Waning Moon. Opponent takes 3, and we use our 1 floating to go ahead and block with an Ironhide just because it's efficient. Yep, and on our turn we go ahead and CNC our opponent. We pitched Hypothermia away this time because with our opponent so low, I want to prioritize the damaging card. Especially since I'm coming at them with a CNC on this turn, which they're probably going to block. So, yeah. So the Hypothermia, I mean, I don't expect I'll be able to, you know, get my opponent with it anyway. Also, Frosting in Arsenal sort of technically means we can threaten lethal this turn. Frosting plus Waning Moon is lethal if our opponent doesn't pitch anything. Alright, then our opponent plays an incantation. Although they could have used Become the Arknight to discard a non-attack and find a Gloomveil. The Gloomveil will get go again and they'll be able to Thorn. But then like they could potentially get taxed and they won't be able to pay through the tax. So I think that's why they chose to go down this route. And then we go ahead and Frosting them. They block it with their 1 floating. And we Waning Moon them. Yeah, opponent responds to the Frostbite by activating the Tunic. So they have 1 to pay into AB. And we go ahead and block the 2 physical from the Thorn. So at this point, we basically have lethal if we Arsenal the Ice Bolt. Because 3 Arcane from that, they can at most block 2, they'll take 1. And then Waning Moon, another 3, they can at most block 2, they take 1. So I go ahead and just, you know, play this Frosting. It just takes a card from my opponent's hand because they definitely don't want to go to 1 when I have Waning Moon. Yep, so they pitch for that, and we basically have lethal here. Yeah, opponent triggers the incantation, and I just kill them in response over here. Yeah, with the Ice Bolt into a Waning Moon. So yeah, that was the game. I definitely don't think I played that game as well as I could have. I was not efficient with my chess piece. As well as I think that Insidious Chill, which I missed, I think I should have done that. It would have saved me more damage in the long run. And plus, whatever other misplays I already mentioned as we were going through it. So yeah, that was the game. Thank you for watching and hope you enjoyed it.